Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, episode 108. It's the first week of January 2017, and the theme of this episode is Be Who You Are. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that the theme Be Who You Are is based upon the untenable presumption that each of us knows who we really are to begin with. You're asking yourself, how is it possible for one to be who one really is unless one already knows something about the deeper, truer self? You're aware that, with some few exceptions, our culture encourages and rewards mass conformity and discourages us from asking the great philosophical, ethical, and even theological questions that seek to penetrate the socially constructed personas we use to get through our day. You're remembering how the father of Western philosophy, Socrates, is reported to have said that the unexamined life is not worth living. And yet you, dear listener, know that millions upon millions have lived exactly such lives and died not knowing who they really were. Perhaps you yourself, as you lie awake on sleepless nights, dance with the possibility that the real you eludes even your own grasp. And perhaps horror of horrors doesn't really exist at all. What if we are nothing more than the masks we wear? Shadows passing briefly through the universe. Meaningless silhouettes bereft of depth and purpose. What then, communication diva? What if our attempts to be our true selves, our repudiation of the social contract, beget nothing more than contempt, scorn, or even hostility? Oh, diva, what have you wrought? What can of cosmic worms have you opened? What are we, your faithful listeners, to do now? Well, that's it from me. Now it's over to you, Jen. And Happy New Year, everyone. Woo!
Methinks intro voice man has had too many shortbread cookies. Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, the show that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. I'm Jen Swanson, and Happy New Year to you. This time last year, I was just in the process of being laid off from a half-time position that I had been in for 9 years. It was a devastating time. It was a department downsize where half the team were let go, and the months leading up to it, in fact, I would say even a year or two before that, were some of the most stressful that I have ever experienced in my working life. I actually ended up having horrific panic attacks, which I'd never had ever before, and I actually didn't know what was going on. What was happening to me. I thought it was something more dastardly than that. In the other half of my life, I was, and I still am, working as a church minister. And a year ago, or just before that, I think it was just before Christmas, maybe 2015, I had 2 younger members of my congregation diagnosed with raging forms of cancer. And so I was busy being supportive and pastoral to those people and pretty much falling apart in the meantime with the other part of my life. And I was worrying that I too had some kind of dread disease until I learned more than I ever wanted to know about stress and anxiety and what that can do to your body and to your mind. For some reason, when a lot of the intensity of the situation in my workplace was going on, I was driving over bridges and driving over through tunnels, because part of my work was to go supervise healthcare students in their clinical placements. So they were in class for a number of months doing the theory, and then they went out into the hospitals, and part of my job was to go around to the different hospitals and watch them as they were doing their clinical. And so I was driving a lot, and they had me driving all over the place to multiple different sites, which was stressful enough. But it was during those driving times that I was having these panic attacks, and it took me a really, really long time to be able to drive over a bridge again or drive through a tunnel, which is really weird, but apparently not for people who have panic attacks and high anxiety. So again, I learned so much more than I ever wanted to learn about what the body and the mind does when it's in situations that are exceedingly stressful. Now, thankfully, I have an amazing family doctor who was more than supportive. And I also went to see a therapist for a few sessions, a really lovely woman who, after about 2 visits, said to me, "Jen, you don't need therapy. You just need to get out of that place." So, and I went back one more time because we just enjoyed chatting with each other, but it was a really intense time. And so I decided not to wait for the layoff end date, because what happens is you get a layoff notice and then you get so many months before it actually happens. And so in January, I asked for what was apparently an unusual request of just leaving then. Basically, I'm done. It meant losing 3 months of benefits, but I just wanted the stress and the anxiety and the worry and the discord and discomfort to stop for my health and well-being. I needed a fresh start. And I know others didn't. Others stayed right to the end. But I just needed to move on. And perhaps you've experienced something like this in your work life. Perhaps you've been in a situation that was impossible to change from within. You know, sometimes it doesn't matter how qualified you are or what credentials or experience you have. When you're in the middle of a storm, it can be impossible to do anything effective. And I used to try and rationalize that. I'm a certified conflict coach. I have years of experience teaching human relations skills and communication classes. I have a master's degree in leadership, and I'm an ordained clergy member who does marriage and other kinds of counseling. And yet there wasn't anything I could do that would make a difference in what felt like a very toxic work environment. And I found myself, unable to do anything but accept the layoff and leave. And since that time, all sorts of new and exciting things have been going on. And truly, it felt, when I made that decision, like a weight had been lifted, like new opportunities have arisen. And yeah, I still get the occasional panic attack. There's a lot of residual from situations like this. But actually, when it feels so awful right in the midst of it, and you think that nothing's ever going to get better, a year later, looking back, a lot has happened. I started podcasting again, for one thing, after a year and a half off. And interestingly, the last podcast before I broke for a year and a half, I was doing many other things in there, publishing a book and doing all sorts of other things. But the last podcast was episode 99, and it was all about PTSD. Which is kind of funny because I almost feel like that's what happened. But since then, I've started podcasting again. I'm very excited about that. I started a new adventure in fitness, learning to kickbox, and I've been keeping that up consistently several times a week. I'm cooking a lot more, which I enjoy, like cooking real food from scratch. And I've launched 2 online courses that I'm excited about. One is how to get your resume in top shape. It's a short, under an hour course that's video based, and then I launched a very big course in the summer. It's a communication course for couples that, while it's billed as a marriage preparation course, it's good for any couple in a long-term committed relationship, or even for those who have been married for years. I have had at least one or two couples who have purchased it who are married and have been for a long time and just thought it would be a really good refresher. So I have plans to launch an interview skills course in the next month or two, and lots of other things going on, lots of speaking gigs and workshops that I'm leading. So while sometimes the devastation of a job loss, especially one you love doing, can feel like the end of the world, eventually new things emerge. I've told students in the past, and I think the same thing applies here, that you are not defined by the work that you do. I used to tell the students that their worth as human beings has nothing to do with their test scores or the fact that perhaps they failed a test or didn't make it through a program. I used to tell them, don't define yourself by this failure. You are worthy as a human being, regardless of what successes and failures happen, in your life. You're not defined solely by what it is you do. And I know in North America, that one of the first questions we ask, which apparently is rude in other countries, in France in particular, it's rude, but the very first question we ask after we meet someone is, so, what do you do? It's a cultural thing. And it helps us to form our opinion about the other person, which is really unfortunate if you think about it. And the first time I heard that was a rude thing to do in France, I was fascinated. And I thought, yeah, because that is just a piece of who you are. It's not who you are as a human being. And you're far more than the job that you do, or the interview that you blow, or the job that you're fired from or downsized from. And yet for many people, yes, the work that they do is a huge part of their identity, which can be challenging for them when they are downsized, or even when they retire and they are no longer a teacher and actively, or a doctor or a pastor or whatever it is that they did. That can be a real challenge when people are facing retirement and when when they have been so tightly identified with the role and the work that they did. And I had a hard time not being a college teacher anymore, because I had done that in a part-time capacity for 23 years. And when September rolled around and I didn't need to make lesson plans, there was grief. And there was loss, and there was sadness. And I have since redefined myself as an online teacher, and I do live workshops all over the place. And last spring, I taught 7 groups of 10th graders in a local high school over a few days. And I'm doing employment skills workshops for youth in libraries around town. So I'm still using the skills of all the years of teaching, just in a reimagined and different way. And one of the nice things about that is I don't have to mark papers anymore. So that's good. So this long story has been to say to you, dear listener, that it's important in everything you do to be who you are. And on your resume, in your cover letter, in your job interview, in your role as an employee, and in your personal relationships, be who you are. Yesterday, I was reading something in preparation for writing my sermon this week, and I came across this, and I'm paraphrasing it because I didn't write it down. And I'm not getting religious here. I just wanted to share what I thought was an interesting couple of sentences and how I came to want to talk to you today about this topic. So the sentences said something like this: Jesus spent his whole life trying to tell and show people who he really was. And we live, and I presume the author meant North America here, but this might be true of other places as well. And we live in a culture that consistently tries to have us doubt who we are. We live in a culture that consistently tries to have us doubt who we are. Isn't that sad, really? Think of commercials. You'll have a better, more exciting life if you drink this brand of beer, or you wear these jeans, or this perfume, or you drive this car. We're constantly barraged by messages everywhere that we need to be something different than who we are. We need to look younger or fitter or wear fancier clothes or have letters behind our names. We need to do these things to be a successful human being. And it's crap. You are worthy just the way you are. And it's sad that we measure ourselves constantly in this way and that we're put in this position. Think of how we edit ourselves on social media. I had this conversation once with a classroom of students, and one young woman told a story. She said she knew a girl back in high school who, according to her Facebook profile, had the most amazing parties on a regular basis. Every weekend, she'd post pictures of the party that she threw on Friday or Saturday, and everyone looked like they were having the best time. And so one day, this woman was invited to this girl's party. She didn't know her very well, but they were friends on Facebook. And she said she went to this party and nothing was going on. People were just sort of sitting around, and it was okay. It was pleasant, but it wasn't nearly as amazingly incredible as all the other parties seemed to be on Facebook. And she kind of wondered why. And so she stayed for a couple of hours, and again, it was pleasant, it was nice, but it was nothing special or spectacular. Well, the next day, she saw the girl's Facebook profile and was stunned to see the photos of the evening, and she was in one or two of them, where everyone looked like they were having the best time of their lives. And she said it was really, really eye-opening. And then we as a class had a big discussion about authenticity and about being who you are, especially in the workplace. I saw a t-shirt once that said, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." And I really wish I had that t-shirt because it's one of those truths with a capital T. It's one of those truisms, those true things that there's no one else like you. You are a unique, beautiful individual. And sure, we all have our flaws and we all have things that we'd like to work on, but there is nobody like you. And there's something special about that. So now I'm not suggesting that we don't edit ourselves depending on our context. Often we do behave differently with clients or customers than we do with colleagues. Often we are more professional when we're dealing with the public than perhaps we are when we're just talking with our coworkers. Sometimes we even have a different voice. And I did a whole podcast episode, I can't remember what episode it was, but on your tone of voice. And I noticed that when I go into one of the chain coffee shops, and the person goes, "Hi, how are you today?" And then they turn around, they talk in a normal voice to somebody they're working with. And then they come back and go, "Great, have a wonderful day." And it's kind of fake and kind of weird, but people do it. And it's their professional voice. That's what, their customer service voice, I guess. So we do that. We all do that kind of thing. But fundamentally, what I'm talking about is representing who you actually are and finding work that aligns with that. Because if you're in work that doesn't align with that, or you're working in a system or with a group of people that doesn't hold the same value system or the same belief system as you do, and you're finding yourself not being able to be who you are in that system, then that will wear you down. Authenticity is an important core value for me. And so doing things like embellishing or building up experience or education on a resume that isn't quite accurate, that isn't quite an accurate representation, that kind of stuff doesn't work for me. Be real. Be who you are and don't be ashamed of it. If you aren't good at something and you want to be, then figure out how to get good at it and be honest about that. I know a whole generation of us were told that we could do and be anything we wanted to be. And I don't think that's quite true. There are some things that I just can't do or be. And if you've been told your whole life growing up that you can do anything, it's a harsh sad and upsetting reality when you find out that no, I'm just not good enough in math to pass the air traffic controller test to be an air traffic controller, or I can't skate, so I can't be a, professional figure skater, or whatever it is. There are things that you can't do because you're not gifted or talented that way. And that's just reality. But you are gifted and talented in other ways that are unique to you. So what can you lift up? What can you, what can you do that's real? Be who you are and don't be ashamed of it. If you aren't good at something, again, figure out how to be good at something and see where you get to. Be honest about it. In an interview, there is always some version of the question, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And people kind of roll their eyes because it's the ubiquitous question. Everyone always asks something like that. It might sound like, tell me what your growing edges are, or what things do you know you need to work on right now? Those are all really valid, legitimate questions, and they're not asked because people want to see, point out what you're bad at. They're asked for the purposes of finding out how self-aware you are and how straight up and honest you are, how authentic you are. And so being real about the answer is important. It's a good idea to really think about that question. And I have seen, I've asked this question in essays and really called people on some of the inauthentic answers I've gotten. I remember one where I asked someone what her strengths and weaknesses were in preparation for making resumes and going to interviews, and her answer was, I'm too organized, or I'm too nice to people, and that's a wolf in sheep's clothing, or whatever the expression is. That's not honest. What is something you're not so good at? And what are you going to do to improve that? And that's what I was looking for. So I would write in the margin of the essay, try again. That's not an honest answer. I'm too organized, and it drives everyone crazy. That's trying to hide a strength in a weakness, and that's not legitimate. Actually, it used to make me mad. And the answers I got back again when I'd send the paper back and say, do it again, were far, far more real and far, far more honest. And my hope is that person actually sat and thought about that for a while. So, it's a good idea to think about that question, especially now in January when people tend to make New Year's resolutions and set some goals for the next year, and in preparation for that question in a job interview, or even in an interview to be promoted, or in an annual review. We're always going to be asked that question of, what more do you need to be doing? I remember sitting in an interview with an interview panel, hiring someone in an organization I worked for, and we asked the similar question, but it was, what areas of continuing education do you hope to pursue? And the response came back, I have a doctorate in blah, blah, blah. I've spent, 13 years doing this. I don't need any more education. Well, I can tell you that my eyebrow went up, and I turned and looked at a few other people in the room, and their eyebrows went up. And the immediate impression was, wow, this person knows it all. We don't know it all. So there are always places that we can improve. There are always things that we can do better at if we want to. So I'm going to leave you with 3 questions to ponder this week. And if you want to write me a note or send me a voicemail, I'd be happy to hear, some of the answers to this. But if not, just ponder these questions for yourself. There are 3 of them. The first one is, what is something you are not so good at that you would really like to get better at? And the second question is, what first step can you take toward getting there? What very first step can you take right now, today, toward getting better at that thing that you're not so good at? And the third question, where in your life can you be more authentically who you are? Where in your life can you be more authentically who you are? These are big questions, I know. Well, here's to a year of success, a year of growth, a year of authentic living, and a year of better communication all around. If you'd like to learn more about upgrading your resume, check out my Resume Secrets course at courses.communicationdiva.com. I've had a number of people go through that and have had really good feedback. It's quick, and it's, once you sign up for it, you have access to it for as long as you need it. So check that out. If your love relationship needs a communication boost, if you are engaged or you know an engaged couple and you want to give them a very unique wedding gift, check out my fully online marriage preparation course called Marriage Works. And again, that's at courses.communicationdiva.com. And so until next time, wishing you health and happiness, this is Jen Swanson. Thanks so much for being here.